my name is Alyssa Johnson, and my policy speech will be on the opioid epidemic. Our world is based on the principle that if there's a problem, we want a quick fix, and we are constantly inventing new things that fix issues and dilemmas that we're facing. And so when I was faced with the task of fixing the opioid epidemic, it got me thinking, in the perfect world, how would I fix the most preventable killer in America? And as I was brainstorming ideas on what my action steps would be, I realized that we live in a country that prioritizes money and control. And realistically, ending the opioid epidemic would cause massive monetary losses to not only the pharmaceutical companies, but to the law enforcement and health services. And that was it. The only way to fix the problem is to fix the environment that the issue lives in. So my plan, which is inspired by the American Medical Association and their opioid task force, is as follows. Step one, probably the biggest step, is money. Everything now in America, across the world, revolves around money because money talks. Solving this issue is extremely expensive. And there are very few organizations or governmental parties that are willing to fund this because it can upset the pharmaceutical companies, because they do have such a big influence on how our government works. While funding and grants from smaller medical organizations are extremely helpful and are very welcomed, it doesn't help fund the long-term programs that need long-term funding. According to a website called AmericanProgress.org, pharmaceutical companies receive substantial U.S. governmental assistance in forms of basic funding, research, and tax breaks. Yet, even though they are receiving millions of dollars every year and not paying nearly anything in taxes, they are receiving more and more money every year because they're increasing and profiting more on these opioids. Another person named Ryan Hampton, who is an ex-addict and who has created a very successful organization called Facing Addiction, also wrote a book called American Fix. And in his book, it quotes, "Addiction impacts individuals of every walk of life, fueled by a powerful pharmaceutical industry with a direct financial interest in encouraging the abuse of prescription painkillers." So as the addiction increases, or as more people are dependent on opioids, the pharmaceutical companies are profiting massive amounts, and they will do anything to protect their funds. And this means that the government needs to recognize the severity of this and to cut their loyalties to these profiting organizations. And if they don't, it will be very hard to see any change within the system. Step two, cooperation. All states and stakeholders need to be on the same page and need to come together and rally behind the same goal. Because it's not going to be a successful effort if they don't. And according to the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, coordination and partnership across a wide range of stakeholders, including law enforcement, education, healthcare providers, policymakers, and business community members, need to be present. We need to make sure that we are combating this on all fronts, because we are as strong as our weakest link, and if there is one weak area or a loophole within the implementation of this or within the program and treatment, the benefiting parties, drug addicts and dealers, will find it and exploit it in order to make their profits and to get their drugs. Step three is kind of the stigma and how people view the situation and how it needs to change. People need to be educated on this issue and understand what these people and addicts are actually going through. And at some point, there's no longer that ability to make a choice or free will when it comes to addiction. And for people who've never seen or witnessed addiction firsthand, it is very hard for them to understand this illness. And personally, I have seen addiction and what it can do to someone firsthand with my sibling, and it was extremely hard for me to understand that the things they do and their actions and what they say are solely driven by the thought, when and how can I get high next? Their moral compass, their understanding of right and wrong is thrown out the window because the drugs and the addiction has such a strong tie on their actions, their thoughts, their mannerisms. Like the only thing they can think about is their next fix. According to the U.S. Public Health Surgeon General, he says that we need to understand that opioid disorder is a chronic yet treatable disease, and it's not a moral failing or character flaw, and it must be addressed with compassion. Because when we view these addicts or drug dealers as a subset of society and something that's not valuable, and kind of, you know, think of them in a negative way, knowing that the rest of society has these stigmas and people not being properly educated on this issue, it decreases the chance for people to actually come to their loved ones and admit they need help, based on that when they say they need help, they're just going to be judged or looked at badly, or, you know, not taken seriously, or kind of be like just not accepted or welcomed into the treatment options. My fourth step is the treatment part of it, which is the medical assisted treatment system, also called MAT. According to the FBA, this is when they use medication in combination with counseling and behavioral therapies. It requires the variety of medications that are all approved by the FDA for the treatment of opioid dependence. So it helps people with addiction and go over the withdrawals, that addiction, and kind of what inhibits people from getting clean most of the time is how painful the withdrawals are. Yet there's a lot of backlash and negative stigmas that kind of come along with this, just because it uses drugs to treat a drug addiction. Yet individuals who go through MAT remain in therapy longer, and this is known as the gold standard of treatment. It is the most successful, has the best success rates compared. It helps maintain recovery, reduce transmission of infectious disease, and prevent deaths in patients with opioid use disorders. And I think the largest flaws in this system that we need to look at and fix in order for it to benefit everyone would be that the communication and bureaucratic and administration delays need to be limited. When you're dealing with federal or state level organizations, time is not on your side. They tend to see, like with the DMV, things take forever. You know, when you have to follow certain protocols through bureaucracy, it can take longer. Yet these addicts, they don't have time, which is the issue, because addiction is quick. It escalates very rapidly, and you only need 1 minute to overdose. So waiting weeks for someone who's actually had the ability to reach out and ask for help and saying, we'll see when we can fit you in, it can be very mentally tough to get through that, and sometimes they lose hope very quickly, thinking that, you know, they don't know how long they're gonna wait. So I think improving the system within the authorization that is required will be very beneficial. And my last step is a large-scale evaluation and kind of a trial and error. According to the American Medical Association, we need to evaluate policies, outcomes, to identify what is working, what efforts have been most successful, and categorize what programs we should revise, cancel, or continue based on their success rates. And it's not going to be an all or nothing fix for this issue. Different states and cities are going to and regions are going to face different problems and issues of this overarching opioid epidemic. Some cities may have many issues with implementation of treatment programs or facilities and not being able to get these addicts in quick enough for the funding for, while others may be faced with doctors who prescribe ample amounts. So things that will work in Chicago may not work in Atlanta and may not work in New York, but we need to be willing to be flexible and to be able to adapt to these different environments and have this trial and error period and not being discouraged and to continue going. The opioid epidemic has been prevalent for decades now. It has evolved, grown, and every year killed more and more people. And from the pharmaceutical companies who are gaining billions from this every year to the millions of addicts who are dying from it, this issue will keep expanding, and the people involved are getting smarter and smarter with every sale of these drugs. With no action, they will exploit every weak part of this system, and it will get to a point where there's no realistic action that can be taken. The epidemic needs to be on the forefront of the government's focus, and while there's no simple fix and there's no way this can get fixed in a matter of months or maybe even within a year's time, the stakeholders need to be committed to putting all the resources and energy into it. And even if these efforts only save one person, that's one mother, one sibling, one child, and one father, that is not ruining an entire family. That is one more person who does not have to bury a loved one. And that is one more child who does not have to go through the pain of experiencing death of a parent. And I will be happy if one more person can live freely from addiction. Thank you.